Hello friends, I am the anti-terrorist. Please excuse the mask and the theatrics, but in a country where you can be thrown into a cell just for speaking your mind or questioning the status quo, I'm afraid it's entirely necessary. And since in the United States at the moment there's a bill about to come out that is nicknamed the Thought Crime Bill, which is the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act of 2007. This bill essentially makes what I'm doing right now illegal and could have me thrown in a cell. Now, it's this new bill that's about to be ratified in the States that has prompted me to reshoot this video. This is actually a reshoot of my original introduction video that I put up on YouTube in September. Well, since September I've lost track of how many people have written to me begging me to take my mask off or trying to goad me into taking my mask off. Now, I wear this mask for two very important reasons, very important to me anyway. The first one being that I'm a very private person. I value my privacy very highly, and I will not give it away at any cost. The second reason is the bill that I've just mentioned to you. Essentially, whatever happens in the States is going to happen here in the UK very shortly, and I'm trying to protect myself from that. And that is why I hide my IP address, I disguise my voice, and I hide my face. Now, the information that I have to present to you is far more important than my identity. So I hope my explanation will allow your curiosity to be put to bed and will allow you to actively engage in the conversation that I'm trying to instigate. Another reason I'm wearing a mask is to help you with your conditioning, to help you get used to the fact that our police will soon be wearing masks too. Masks that will enable them to be unaccountable and to protect them from you while they're exercising their ridiculous statutory powers upon you. So why am I doing this? What is the point of these broadcasts? Essentially, unless you've been living in a cave for the last 5 years, you'll know that the New World Order is very much alive and well, and its progress is accelerating at an exponential rate. You will have noticed that in the last 2 to 3 years, the sheer number of police on today's streets has increased exponentially too. Not all of them are real police officers, some of them are community support officers, but they are certainly more visible. And I would contend that we are now living in a police state. Tony Blair certainly put that legislation into place, and Gordon Brown could activate it at any point. We could go into martial law tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock if absolutely necessary. All of the cogs and gears are in place for that to happen quite easily. Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not a conspiracy theorist. I like to be called a conspiracist. I do not deal in theory. Every bit of information I present to you will be backed up by facts. There may be a certain amount of conjecture and hearsay, but the majority of it will be provable. I may assert certain things that may only have circumstantial evidence to back it up at this present time, but I believe them to be true, and that is the context with which I offer it. For instance, 9/11 was an inside job. I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind, even though all we really know as fact is that 2 planes hit 2 buildings and 3 buildings fell down. Those are the facts. Everything else is hearsay and conjecture, but the circumstantial evidence certainly points towards it being an inside job, if not gross negligence and complicity. Now, if you are open-minded enough and educated enough to look for videos like mine, to study them carefully, and have a political opinion, you will know what's going on in the States at the moment. You'll know that 9/11 was an inside job. You'll know that the 9/11 Commission report was a whitewash farce. You'll know that the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England are private enterprises loaning money to the government at interest. You will know that the income tax goes primarily towards paying off the interest on those loans. You'll know that there is no law compelling a US citizen to pay a tax on his sweat equity. Now, you'll have an opinion on those things and you'll think, well, America's a bit screwed. And you'll say to yourself, I'm glad that's not going on here in good old Blighty, in good old Britain. Well, I'm afraid you're sadly mistaken. See, while we were asleep, Tony Blair had been empowering himself and the government in the same way that George Bush has. And Gordon Brown is carrying on the torch. And you'd think to yourself, well, our Prime Minister wouldn't be as much of a despot as George Bush has been. But you are very wrong, I'm afraid. You see, recently there was a demonstration outside Parliament, anti-hunting demonstration. But that was just simply a distraction, because what was going on inside Parliament was far more sinister. Inside Parliament, Tony Blair was passing the Legislative and Regulatory Reform Bill, which basically gives him wartime powers. Now, I know for a fact that most of us awake Brits were watching the 2000 and 2004 election and re-election of George Bush with our mouths agape, wondering what the hell was going on. And all the while we were sleeping, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had a pint in a pub and just decided to switch horses mid-race, and no one batted an eyelid. No one thinks it's slightly odd that we too, without a referendum, without so much as a by your leave, we now have a new leader no one voted in. No one even noticed that. Incredible. For the first time in British political history, the party in power switch horses halfway through the race, and no one gets to say a word about it. If Gordon Brown had been the offered leader of the Labour Party when they first got into power, Labour would not have got into power. Gordon Brown was not like then, and he's not like now. But somehow we have him in power. Bizarre, don't you think? You Americans think you've got problems. You might not know this, but London has the highest concentration of CCTV cameras in the whole world. There is not a single place in central London you can walk without being caught on camera from some angle or other. We are watched everywhere we go, and of course, it's all for our safety. And you try pointing a camera in central London at one of our glorious police officers for any more than 2 or 3 minutes. You'll soon be told to turn that camera off sharpish, and they'll use the anti-terrorism legislation and threats and coercion to force you to put your camera away. But of course, if you turn around and point to the nearest camera and say, well, would you mind not filming me then? They'll just laugh and try and have a little joke with you because, of course, they're just doing their job. And that's my main concern with regards to the police, is that they answer to a corrupt government, and so they are compromised, and they are a danger to us unless we educate them. And then we have 7/7 in London, which was a devastating event. But of course, we Brits are used to a little bit of terrorism, and we got back on with our business the next day. And that philosophy was what allowed Tony Blair to ignore our calls for an investigation. Because of course we had David Shayler, an ex-MI5 employee, offering his educated opinion on the day that it was an inside job as well. And of course there were lots of other coincidences involving training exercises going on at exactly the same tube stations, in exactly the same manner as happened in 9/11 with regards to the NORAD stand-down debacle. So essentially there are a lot of unanswered questions regarding 7/7, and there's no investigation going on, and we're just told to forget about it and move on with our lives. Now, I personally believe it was another contrived event like 9/11, that our governments are using these two contrived events to justify bringing about statutory legislation with a view to removing our civil liberties, our personal freedoms, and our privacy. Now, there may well be individuals in Iran or Iraq that buy into the American dream and the idea of the freedom that they think we have, and may be very jealous and may want to take it away from us. But those two events, 9/11 and 7/7 in London, were manufactured events with a view to forwarding the New World Order agenda. Now, you might say to yourself, if you've got nothing to hide, why worry about the cameras? Why worry about the legislation? If a policeman stops you, just empty your pockets. There's nothing to fear from the policeman. Well, the bottom line is we have a basic right to privacy. I personally am a huge privacy advocate. And so every now and then I'll be walking through Parliament Square and I might stop and talk to Brian Hall. And of course I'll get the odd policeman coming over, takes out his notepad and says, can I have your name, please? And I delight in asking certain questions like, am I obliged to give you that information? And of course the police officer then has to smile and say, no, you're not. And I say, well, thank you very much. Have a good day. And they smile and they turn around and walk away. And that's all it takes. Now my question to you non-believers out there is, how much government corruption are you prepared to accept before you understand and concede that we're being shafted? For instance, in the UK here, we have a government that is trying to force us into the EU without consent or a referendum, and you'll rarely see it in the news at all. We have a government that will sanction illegal activity by our SAS in Iraq, having them dress up as Sunnis or Shiites to inflame conflict. We have a government that is complicit in an illegal invasion of Iraq, because after all, they didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, did they? So there was no probable cause to invade. Yet here we are, and of course we all know that we're not there to spread democracy. So my question is, if you concede that our government is corrupt to some degree or other, even if they're 1% corrupt, how much corruption will you accept? Personally, I have a zero-tolerance policy on corruption. You see, I'm not anti-government, I'm just anti-corrupt government. Aren't you? Now, my request is that you start looking into this matter a little deeper. It's very difficult to sort the wheat from the chaff in terms of what's on YouTube at the moment, but I'm sure if you're committed, you will find the right sources and you will find the information that will prove that we are heading towards a very dark place right now. I would urge you to have conversations with your friends regarding the issues of the RFID chip, the one world religion, the one world currency. What will the one world religion be? Will it be Catholicism? Will it be Islam? What will the currency be? Who will control that currency? Who will have a controlling interest in the central banks that are controlling this currency? These are important questions, and they affect you, whether you believe in this conspiracy or not. Keep an open mind, ask questions, engage in the conversation. Thanks for listening.